So this sheet presents an overview from a particular point of view of what this retreat is about. And I'll be going into the ramifications of it in great detail, and of course we'll be working with this and discussing this and being engaged with this to the extent you want to pursue it over the next 4 days. So I will read it to you now, and then we will back up and go through it in detail. When the eye is single, the entirety is filled with light. This is a quote from Jesus from the Gospel of Thomas. The yoga of radiant presence is the discovery of the substance of your experiencing and realizing the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement with that. This substance, radiant presence, is entirely transcendental, i.e., it's entirely beyond conceiving of, beyond specifying, beyond defining, beyond locating, etc., and yet is the concrete stuff that every aspect of experience whatsoever entirely consists of. So is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy as the presence of your actual experience, this right here. This being the case, this substance is noticeable, discoverable, investigable, explorable, and knowable. Since the faculty by which all of this investigation is effected is it itself, this faculty has the absolutely transcendental nature intrinsic to the substance. So, the transcendentality of the substance is no impediment to the transcendental intelligence of the knowing. And it can be fully known. Presence indicates the actuality, the real being of this substance. That's this actuality right here, this actuality of your experience. And radiant indicates its inherent nature of spontaneously generating infinite apparent experiential characteristics and implications, as well as their intrinsic apprehension as what we call experience. The yoga consists of first noticing, then coming to fully realize that there is in actuality nothing and has never been or will ever be anything other than this condition of absolutely inclusive, transcendental, intrinsic engagement of radiant presence with itself. That's what this is. It's here. What you call your experience is radiant presence being with itself. We'll go into this in great length. So let's back up. I'm going to leave off the quote at the top till the end, and we'll go back to that. So the first paragraph, the yoga of radiant presence is a discovery of the substance of your experiencing and realizing the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement with that. So, the discovery of the substance of your experiencing. What is experience? This is not an abstract thing. Your experience is right here, right now. Check it out. This is for real. This is all that there is here is your experience, as far as you can find, as far as you can know, right? What is it? What's it made of? It's something. It's not nothing, right? Here it is. If it was nothing, how would you be? What would you be experiencing? What would you be seeing? What would you be feeling? Now, of course, we're used to relating to our experience in terms of how we qualify it as the objects and things and conditions. Oh, I'm seeing, a bunch of people sitting in a room. I'm hearing, words coming from my mouth and echoing around the room. I'm feeling my butt on the chair and the temperature of the room and all this. We're used to qualifying that. If you ask somebody what they're experiencing, they might say, I'm seeing a room, I'm this, I'm thinking this thought, I'm feeling this kind of feeling, I'm, a little full from dinner, and but if someone was to say that, what are they actually referring to? They're referring to experiential qualities that are appearing within the field of their experience, right? If it's appearing, what is it that's appearing? So I look and I see a room and I see people sitting in chairs. So what does that refer to? It refers to experiencing patterns, right? Patterns of light. And I'm used to qualifying the patterns of light, and so I can say, well, it's patterns of light. I don't, I'm calling them rooms and people and chairs and so on and so forth, but that's just naming shapes. But how do I know I'm seeing shapes? Well, something is present. What is it that's present? What is, you might say, well, light's present. Okay, cool. So what is light? I mean, putting another name on it, putting another label on it doesn't actually answer any questions, doesn't actually address the fundamental issue. What is light that is present? And most fundamentally, light is not just present, light is experienced. Light is an experience. Light is not an object, light is an experience. So what is this experience? What is light? What is sound? What is thought? What is sensation? What are these, call them energies, call them, weird qualities that show up in the field of your experience. And this is not abstraction. This is what's here. And there's nothing but that here. There's nothing here that you can find but the field of your experience, right? I mean, try and find something other than your experience. Where would you look? How would you engage with it? You have to look within your experience. You have to look within the field of your experience, because that's the only place you can find anything. And all you find in the field of your experience is experience, right? All you find is experience. What is that? Experience is a word. It's an abstraction. But yet this isn't an abstraction. This is not an idea. This is not a thought. There's something here. What is it that's here? How is it that's here? This that is here, this actuality that is here, I'm referring to as the substance of your experience. It's something. It's not a simple something, but it's very specifically something. Now we're used to qualifying this something that's here into all of these different, fields. Let's say, there's light shows up in vision, there's sound shows up in the field of hearing, there's thought shows up in the field of mentality, there's sensation shows up in the field of touch, and so on and so forth. So you have all these qualifications. But if you look very closely at any of these fields, they're ultimately different textures of the same thing. They're different textures of experience itself. And again, experience is a word that sounds kind of like an abstraction. But the fact, the actuality that is here, this is for real. This is not an abstraction, right? This is that which is not an abstraction. Everything else is an abstraction. All the names, all the ideas, all the qualifications is an abstraction. But this that is here is for real, right? This is real. This is actual. This is here. What is the this that is here? It's something. And all of its ramifications and aspects that we have all these qualifications for, all these theories about, are about aspects of one thing, aspects of one condition, aspects of one event. And for this purpose, I'm calling this actuality here the substance. This whatever it is that's here, this thing that is here, this condition that is here, this actuality that is here, this substance. Because it is a substance. Everything that you think of as substance, I mean, I feel this cup, it's here. I mean, there's solidity, it's got temperature. I mean, it couldn't possibly be more concrete. What is this concreteness that is being experienced? Is it in the cup? Say I was dreaming last night and I stubbed my toe on a rock, right? What is the concreteness of that rock that stubs my toe in the dream? Is it in the rock? All the qualities that are experienced are in this. And they show up in all different sorts of degrees, as we all know, in terms of all the astounding, inconceivable spectrum of experiential characteristics that shows up in the course of our experiencing. But the actuality, the presence, the solidity of anything is the solidity of this substance that is here, that is this actuality that alone exists. Try and find anything other than the field of your experience. You can't do it. And what is that field made of? Right? I mean, we can come up with all sorts of fancy abstractions. Oh, it's consciousness. It's consciousness experiencing sensoria. It's biochemical activity in the central nervous system. It's this, it's that, it's the other. But all these abstractions, what actuality are they referring to? The abstractions aren't anything. They're words, they're theories, they're hypotheses. But this is not a hypothesis, is it? This is for real. This is here. This is the only reality. I mean, if someone asks you, what's real, where do you look? Look at your experience, right? This is the touchstone. This is the canon of reality itself. If I say, oh, there's a UFO of pink elephants just landed in the center of this room and they've gotten out with ray guns and they're zapping everyone, you might look around and say, that's an interesting idea, but it's not real to me because I don't experience it. So experience is the gauge of actuality. Experience is the gauge of reality. So this field of your experience that is here, that is present, is what is real. And it alone is real. Anything else, any other qualities to be judged, to be accepted as being actually real, have to be here in your experience somewhere. Right? Or you may, or have to have been in your experience at some time, or you expect them to be in your experience at some time. If I said the moon is in the sky, I say, I don't see the moon now. But I expect if I went outside it would be in my experience. Okay, cool, that's fair enough. So that's a reasonable assumption. But still in all, the touchstone is the fact of it being present in your experience, right? Now, another interesting thing about experience, this is spinning off into implications of this. You can't find anything but your experience, right? As far as you know, your field of experience alone exists, right? As far as you can verify, you are the only experiencer. Now, there may or may not be, of course, everyone may be experiencing, and that's a reasonable hypothesis, and of course we're all used to supposing that. But you can't know that for fact, because you cannot experience another experiencer. And if you did, it would be you. Right? If I could read your mind, the thoughts that I would be reading would be showing up in my experience, so it would be my experience. Right? But look at this. I mean, this is really self-evident and really quite obvious. I mean, it's completely self-evident. Every 2-year-old knows this, that it's all about me, right? This is my experience. You all are just the extras, right? And for you, it's all about you, right? Everyone else is just the extras. And this is just, it's completely obvious. I mean, it's absurd not to, it's absurd to even question that or consider alternatives. I mean, of course, for political correctness and all we do, because you piss the guys off with the guns and you end up in jail or shot or something. So, but anyway, that's a little spin-off. So, the yoga of radiant presence is the discovery of the substance of your experiencing. So what is it that is here? Something is here. Whether or not it's a thing in any simple sense, something is here. This substance, this presence. And realizing the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing, intrinsic, transcendental engagement with that. Now, this is a whole string of words that's kind of interesting, okay? Ongoing, intrinsic, transcendental engagement. There's 4 words, okay? It's ongoing. Does your experience have does it ever, take a break? Does your experience ever take 5 and all of a sudden shut down and then sort of resume sometime? Experience is absolutely integral with itself, right? It doesn't come, it doesn't go. It's ongoing. It is. And there's no isn't, is there? You can't find an isn't. It just is. Experience is. So this is ongoing. It is intrinsic engagement. Okay. So your experience is appearing, right? I assume, right? Everyone's experience is appearing. We ordinarily say, well, I'm seeing my experience. I'm experiencing my experience. My consciousness is experiencing the world or experiencing whatever, the fields of my experience and so on and so forth. We have all these ways of putting it. What is this? This is an engagement. That this is not, experience isn't just here as an inert fact, is it? It's not just like a lump that just, boom, it's here. It's not like that, is it? It's very intimately with itself. Something is with something here. And we're used to thinking that, well, I'm with this, right? I'm with the world. I'm with the field of my experience. I'm with this, right? And this is all very commonplace. It's, completely common language that I'm experiencing my experience. Of course I am. You're experiencing your experience. Sure. No duh, right? Very matter of fact. But look real closely, okay? Experience is showing up. It's not like experience is there and there's some gap or some lag where there's something here that senses, oh, look, there's something there, I better check it out. And it sort of moseys on over and looks at it and checks it out. It's not like that, is it? The actual appearing of experiential qualities is it's being experienced. So the supposition of all this mechanism of consciousness is experiencing the world, or this is experiencing that, this sort of elaborate machinery, this elaborate, polarization of this and of that, and some medium of engagement. It's all sloppy. It's all sloppy supposition. It's not like that. Apparition is apprehension. Appearance is apprehension. It's not like appearance is an objective fact and then apprehension is some subjective fact. You can't find a subjective and you can't find an objective, can you? I mean, look for yourself. When something appears, when anything appears, when any experiential quality, let's call it, appears, that apparition, that very flash, is its being perceived, is its being engaged. So the apparition is engagement. The flash of apparition is engagement. It's not like there's a flash and then something over here that engages. We're used to thinking of it that way, but that's just sloppy abstractions. If you look at the concrete dynamism of your actual experience, there's no process, there's no mechanism, there's no intermediary, there's no something going to meet something. Everything just appears. And that's it. And when it appears, that's the whole show, right? I mean, there's nothing added, there's nothing extra that has to happen then. It's like the apparition is it, right? So this is an intrinsic engagement. This substance is an intrinsic engagement. The substance is in its apparition, And as it appears, that very appearing is intrinsic engagement. Okay? It's ongoing intrinsic engagement because, hey, does it ever stop? Does it ever start? Does it ever, it just is, and without an isn't. It's on without an off. It's just, it's the given. So ongoing intrinsic engagement. And it's transcendental, ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement. What does transcendental mean? Transcendental means you can't get a handle on it. You can't wrap your head around it. You can't analyze it. You can't, parse it. You can't break it down into its component parts and suss it out and figure out what's going on with it, right? So here's this flash, right? And we call it, experiencing vision. Bang, here it is. It just appears, and that in that apparition is the experiencing. What happens there? You can't say. It's dumbfounding. It's completely obvious. It's right here. You can check it out all you want, but you can't figure it out. You can't say anything about it. You can't sort it out. You can generate all sorts of elaborate theories effortlessly, all sorts of bullshit, and of course as humans we're very used to that. And that will continue to happen, as long as history persists, no doubt. But does any of it hit the mark? Is any of it just in the simple apparition, it already is what it is. Completely, comprehensively, inclusively, nakedly, obviously, and dumbfoundingly. You can't sort out experiencing. You can't make sense of it. You can't parse it. You can't analyze it. You can't, define it. You can't localize it even. You can't. So anyway, we have this ongoing intrinsic engagement that is transcendental. Ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement. And the engagement is with the substance. What's engaged with the substance? Well, you can't say nothing's engaged with it, but its appearance is engagement. So you could say, well, it's engaged with itself, but what does that mean? But there is engagement, right? There is profound engagement, right? There's an absolute, intoxicated, almost an addiction to this engagement, to this participation. But there's nothing. You can't find anything that's participating with anything that's being participated with, and yet, just in its apparition, in its presence, it is a participation. It is an engagement, right? And check it out for yourself. I'm asserting all these things, and it's not the gospel. It may or may not be the gospel, but it's useless to you unless you check it out for yourself. The advantage of this is just to look at it and see how it fits into your universe, to your reality, to your understanding. So, realizing the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement with that. Ongoing, absolute inclusiveness. This engagement, can you find anything that is outside, that's being left out? Can you find anything outside of your engagement with your experience? The whole universe is here. The moon exists because it appears as an engagement in your experience, right? The whole human race exists, as far as you know, solely because it appears as an engagement within your experience, right? The Andromeda Galaxy exists, as far as you know, solely because it appears as an engagement within your experience. Is there anything that's left out? Is there anything that's missing? Is there anything that's some other category? You can't find it. All you can find is this event, this condition, this fact, of your experiencing, right? It's the only actuality. So this is the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement with that, with this substance, with this actuality. And it is, it is an engagement. It is engaged with itself, you could say. So, to recap, the first paragraph says, the yoga of radiant presence is the discovery of the substance of your experiencing, this that is here, and realizing the absolute inclusiveness of the ongoing intrinsic transcendental engagement with that, with this substance that is here. Second paragraph reads, this substance, radiant presence, is entirely transcendental. That is, it is entirely beyond conceiving of, specifying, defining, locating, etc. And yet, it is the concrete stuff that every aspect of experience whatsoever entirely consists of. So is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy, as the presence of your actual experience, this actuality that is here, your experience that is real, that is here, that is what's happening, as far as you're aware, right? So, let's back up and see what this paragraph is constructed of. So this substance, this that is here, right? This, your experience, this actuality. I'm calling it radiant presence, and we'll look more specifically into why I call it that a little later in the paper. This substance is entirely transcendental. What this is that is here is entirely transcendental. What does that mean? It means it's entirely beyond conceiving of. You can't form an idea of it. You can't describe it accurately. You can't define it. You can't map it. You can't draw it. I mean, and paradoxically, you can't define or draw or map or conceive of or describe anything else. And everything that has ever been described by a human being ever in all of history has been nothing but this. Right? And how much do these descriptions diverge from each other? Right? And yet, everyone's describing exactly the same thing. Everyone's talking about the only thing they can talk about, which is this actuality of your experience. And so, this substance is entirely transcendental, is entirely beyond conceiving of. Right? It's beyond specifying, point to it, indicate it, qualify it with regard to something else. Say, I mean this, not that. All of that kind of an effort, all of that kind of a mode of approach, of analysis, just it doesn't go anywhere. It's absurd. It's completely absurd, right? It just doesn't work. If this is completely actual, and yet you can't pin it down. You can't define it. You can't specify it. It's beyond defining. It's beyond locating. Where is it? Where is this? Here's the substance. Here's the actuality of your experience. Where is it? Well, it's here. Okay, sure, but here is just a euphemism for where it is, but it doesn't answer the question. Where is it? Where is your experience happening? What's it sitting on? What's it in? What's holding it up? What's it suspended from? What dimension is it in? Right? Can you locate it? Where is it? Is that even meaningful? I mean, it's just a given. Location comes from experience, not the other way around. And most of experience is completely beyond locating, right? When you're in deep sleep, where are things? When you're unconscious, where are things? Well, they're here. Well, sure, they're here. Or maybe they're there, which is just a complicated way of saying here. But where is that? Well, here, in my experience. Okay, where is that? You can't say, can you? It's just a given. Yeah. And this, again, is a way of beginning to indicate the absolutely transcendental nature of this substance, of this actuality that is here, this thing that is here. And yet, even though this substance is transcendental, you can't make any headway whatsoever at pinning it down or making sense of it or even finding it. Although, it's sort of a no-brainer. It doesn't ever go away, so you don't even need to find it. But even though it is completely transcendental, it is the concrete stuff that every aspect of experience whatsoever entirely consists of. So everything, all the concreteness of your experiencing, this is hard, this is loud, that hurts, all this, it's very concrete, it's very actual, it's very solid, it's really present, not present in some abstract sense, but it's solidly present, right? I mean, I see you, I really see you, right? It's not vague, it's not squishy, it's very solid, and all this solidity, the solidity of this cup isn't in the cup, it's in experience. Experience is what's solid, not cups and the ground and fists. They aren't solid. Experience is solid. Look at a dream, right? You can be in a car crash in a dream. You can bash your thumb with a hammer in a dream, right? You can get stabbed in a dream. You can get punched in a dream, And when you're dreaming, it can feel just as solid as it might feel, let's say in this condition we call the waking state, right? Where's that solidity coming from? The solidity of a hammer in a dream, the solidity of a fist in a dream, the solidity of a knife in a dream, the solidity of an angry person or being in a dream, it's in your face. What's that? Where's that coming from? It's not coming from the hammer, it's not coming from the person, it's not coming from the thing. It's just a dream, there's nothing there. It's coming from the dreaming. It's coming from the substance of experience itself, which when we're dreaming we call dreaming. When we're awake we don't call it waking. I mean, we might, but we call it, no, this is the real world. This is really here. Your experience is really here. When you're dreaming, your experience is really here in the dream, right? And when you're in deep sleep, your experience is really here in deep sleep. And then what's going on? You don't even ask the question, let alone find any answer. So, that's a little digression. So, the substance, radiant presence, is entirely transcendental, i.e., is entirely beyond conceiving of, beyond specifying, beyond defining, beyond locating, etc. And yet, is the concrete stuff that every aspect of experience whatsoever entirely consists of. So is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy as the presence of your actual experience. So the presence of anything, which is, presence is very obvious, with something hard. But presence is obvious with any experience. Any experience is being experienced because it is present. Right? If it wasn't present, you wouldn't be being experienced. You can have a thought, you can seem to be very vague. There is some wispy little But if it's there in your experience, let's say, the way we usually put it, if it's actually being experienced, it is present, it is actual, it is solid, it is as present as if someone threw a rock at you and it hit you in the face. No more or less present than that, just a different textual dimension or something, you might say. So, this substance is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy as the presence of your actual experience. So when something is present, it is this substance that is present, right? It is the substance of experience that is present. And whatever object or condition may seem to be embodying that substance is a will-o'-the-wisp. It's being borrowed within, just like in a dream. The hardness of anything in a dream that feels hard isn't in the thing, it's in the dreaming. It's being put there by the dreaming because the dreaming can feel hard. Dreaming can feel soft. Dreaming can feel like anything. Waking can feel like anything. It can feel hard. It can feel soft. Right? It can feel fuzzy. It can feel like just shining, right? But it's still just this that is here. It is something that is here. It's an actuality. So, this substance, radiant presence, is entirely transcendental. It is entirely beyond conceiving of, specifying, defining, locating, etc. And yet, is the concrete stuff that every aspect of experience whatsoever entirely consists of. And so it is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy as the presence of your actual experience. I could have said as the presence of all your actual experience. So this is here. And everything that seems to show up in your experience is just this that is here. It's something that is here. And the fact that it appears or presents in this bewildering, infinite range of characteristics and textures and experiential qualities and solidities and degrees of solidity and all of that is just part of its weirdness, it's part of its strangeness. It can look like, it can feel like your feet on the ground. It can feel like a vague thought, right? It can feel like an emotion. It can feel like anything. But what is being felt is the same thing. Where do these things come from? Where does the texture of thought come from? Where does the texture of the ground under your feet come from? Well, it comes from experience. And so all of this incredible range of characteristics which seem so different from each other are just this. This being the case, i.e., that your experience is reality is being ongoingly engaged with absolute nakedness and intimacy as the presence of your actual experience. This being the case, this substance is noticeable, discoverable, investigable, explorable, and knowable. So, you can notice that this is here. You can notice that it's something, right? Because it is here, because it is being engaged with, because it is actually present. And it's already being engaged with, so it's accessible, it's available, it's noticeable. You can notice that this is the case. You can notice that your experience is present, not as an abstraction, but as this that is here. This amazing condition that is here, that presents itself with all of these astounding range of weird, experiential textures, call it whatever. We don't even have language for this stuff. But it's noticeable. You can check it out. It's discoverable. You can look very closely at it. You can be with it. What is vision? You can feel what vision is. What is thought? You can feel what thought is. Because you are feeling it. To perceive is to feel. Because perceiving is a very, very, very intimate engagement. When you see something, it's not over there and you're not over here. Its apparition is the seeing. It's an absolutely intimate engagement. Couldn't be more intimate. It's just completely one. So the fact that all of this apparition is intrinsically an engagement means it's explorable. You can be with this engagement. What is seeing? That's not a vague, abstract question that you can sit and think about. What is seeing? What's seeing? It's an actual concrete solidity that can be participated with absolute intimacy, just like you can participate with the ground by feeling it under your feet. You can participate with sound by hearing it. You can participate with music just by its presence and its dynamism and its amazing, range of qualities and so on and so forth. So this substance is noticeable, discoverable, investigable. You can check it out. You can look at it all different sorts of ways. It's explorable. Well, this is really interesting. You can explore it. So what is there to explore? Well, let's see. What is there to explore? You can look at a thought. Oh, here's a thought. Okay, this thought's happening. Thoughts are sort of wafting around wherever in this weird way that they do, right? But you can explore that. Where is it happening? Check out where that's happening. What's happening a little deeper there? What's happening there, but way over there, way off to the side? You can actually kind of navigate within. You can't make sense of what's happening when you do that. It's not rational. It's not something it's not amenable to analysis or to description or to definition, but participatorily, you have an inconceivable, literally an infinite range of ways that you can be with this, that you can be in this. And this has infinite depths and subtleties and nuances, so it's explorable. You can go on voyages through your experience and discover astounding vistas, astounding dimensions, astounding conditions and qualities, and we call it spaces, experiential spaces, that you can't describe them or anything, and yet it's experienceable, it's knowable, it's directly engageable with. And in all of this exploration, there is learning, there is a revelation of qualities, a revelation of possibility, a revelation of subtlety. And all of this subtlety is made of pure intelligence. It's not just meaningless. It's not just some inert shape or form that's just sitting there like a bloop, It's all incredibly profound, meaningful dynamism and structure. It's function. It's not a function that's doing anything that you can rationally make sense of, or even what's happening rationally make sense of. And yet, it is clearly incredibly subtle and intricate and nuanced, and there's a sense of meaningfulness, a sense of profundity that just permeates every aspect of it. And by being with it in its starting to be with it in its many forever guises, it's a learning curve, it's a sensitization. You become sensitive to its aspects, its profound intelligence, its profound meaningfulness, just by being with the astounding range of subtlety that it presents. It's like nature photographs. You ever look through like a National Geographic or something, you just see these incredible places that exist on Earth. It's like, my God, who'd have thought these colors and shapes could even exist? It's just astounding, and you see these brilliant colors and all this stuff. There's something there. It's not just inert. It's not just, oh, that's a shape. It's not like that, is it? It's like, whoa, there's a profundity there. There's an intelligence. There's a meaningfulness. There's a sensitivity that is valuable, right? That conveys value, and this conveyance of value is intrinsic to form itself, and all experience, is forms. Most of the forms are very, very, very subtle, and you don't even think of them as forms. Like, what's the form of the background of a thought? But it's not nothing. It's something. It's a very subtle, very dynamic, very nuanced form. But it is a form. There's nothing but form. There's all of this Experiential qualitativeness is all forms, and all form is intelligence, is meaningfulness, is functionality. We're very aware of the superficial, obvious aspects. I mean, look at our bodies, this astounding functionality of this form. This bizarre seeming machine that is here that can get up and walk and eat and procreate and engage in communication with seeming others and all this stuff, right? I mean, everyone knows that's profound, that's what the human game is playing with that profundity. But this is just taking it a little further and finding the same profundity in non-human context, in subtle context of any and all form, any and all experiential form. And all experience is formal. All experience has some degrees of form. So, this substance is noticeable, discoverable, investigable, explorable, and it's knowable. And the rest of the paragraph goes into this quality of knowability. So, since the faculty by which all this investigation is effected is it itself. So when you look at experience, what's looking? Where does that come from? If I say, look at your thoughts, what are you doing? Well, you can't say. It's not like there's a you and, well, what I'm doing when I look at my thoughts is I reach over here and I do such a, it's absurd, right? And yet you can do it. There's an engagement which is available, which is present, which can be participated with, which can engage. And in this engagement there is a quality of knowing, right? There's a quality of intelligent assimilation in some way, let's say, whatever it is, right? It's not like you can make any sense of it, but you can't make any sense of anything, so no surprise there. So, the faculty by which all of this investigation is effected is it itself. This experiencing is what investigates experiencing, right? The fact that you are experiencing is how you investigate the fact that you are experiencing. That doesn't make sense. Well, yeah. Okay, so what? Let's forget about, let's lose that dog. That's not going to get us anywhere. Nothing makes any sense, though. And claiming something makes sense is just, is just an assertion of someone that wants to manipulate you. Since the faculty by which all of this investigation is effected is it itself, this faculty that does this investigation of experience has the absolute transcendental nature intrinsic to the substance, intrinsic to what is being investigated. We were talking earlier in the previous paragraph about how what this that is here, is transcendental. It's astounding. It's weird. It's infinite. You can't get a handle on it. You can't make sense of it. You can't define it. You can't map it. You can't describe it. You can't capture it in an abstraction. It is it itself, and what that is completely just that. The only way you can approach it is as itself. You can't approach it as something else that you're putting over here. Which is just, we have a saying which captures that very simply, which is the map is not the terrain, right? But if you look at that statement is very obvious in every sense. But if you look at that statement profoundly, it goes all the way. It goes infinitely. The terrain is completely just itself. It's not like anything else. There's nothing that it's like. You can't say it's like this, it's like that. There's no it's like. So this that is here is just itself. It's not like anything. It's just itself. And if you want to check it out, you have to check it out directly. You have to let it show you what it is. You can't build a map or build a model and then check out the model and expect to be learning anything about this itself. So this faculty has the absolutely transcendental nature intrinsic to the substance. This that is here is completely beyond defining, beyond getting a handle on. And what is knowing this, which is this itself, is, of course, likewise beyond defining. How can you define what is knowing? How is experience known? What is it that knows experience? What is it that experiences experience? It's a completely transcendental issue. It's a completely transcendental function, let's call it. It's a completely transcendental event. What is being known is transcendental, and the fact that it is being known and the way it's being known is equally transcendental. Because what's knowing it is as transcendental as what is being known, it can be known. They have the same infinite capacity. They have the same infinite irrational nature. So the fact that this is inconceivable is not an impediment to knowing it, because what's knowing it is equally inconceivable. What is consciousness? Right? What is consciousness? Well, consciousness, 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 right? Well, that's consciousness. It's dizzying. It's mind-boggling. It's completely self-evident that this presence, this that is here, is being known, is being experienced. Even though you cannot get to the bottom of what that means, even scratch the surface of what that means. You can't even begin asking the question, well, what does that mean? How does that happen? And yet it's completely self-evident that that is the case. So, since the faculty by which all this investigation is effected is it itself, this transcendental condition, this faculty has the absolutely transcendental nature intrinsic to the substance. What's knowing it is as transcendental as what's being known. So, the transcendentality of the substance is no impediment to the transcendental intelligence of the knowing. Since knowing is equally inconceivable, and the known is inconceivable, they can meet. They're homeboys. They're in the same tribe. They're in the same league. They're in the same transcendental conditions. So they can completely be with each other as they actually are, because they already are with each other as they are.
Can I ask a question about that?
Just to say. So the transcendentality of this substance is no impediment to the transcendental intelligence of the knowing, and it can be fully known. So even though this is what is here, this substance, this that is present, is absolutely transcendental and inconceivable, it can be fully known. This is a very important point. It's really easy to superficially to look at this and go, well, okay, this is transcendental, I get that, so we're screwed. It's like, okay, yeah, I'm going out for a beer. No, it's transcendental, so okay, yeah, right, that leaves me out. But does it? And this is the point. This is the point, does it? Because if you look at what you are, if you look at what's knowing your experience, you find it's the same thing. It's equally transcendental. And so the fact that it's inconceivable, the fact that what you're trying to get at is inconceivable is not an impediment, because the means by which you're getting at it is equally inconceivable. They're the same inconceivable, so they can meet each other. Question?
Yeah. Just a hunch. It seems that the knowing and presence, or knowing and appearance, is actually the same thing. There's no lag time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like there isn't two things going on there.
Right. Yeah, that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, okay.
And yet, that doesn't invalidate exploration. That doesn't invalidate, development of participation. That doesn't invalidate investigation and so on and so forth. So even though the instant of experiencing is entirely transcendental engagement fully manifest, its very nature is to deepen and continue to unfold to itself, which we experience as ongoing revelation, as ongoing learning, as development of sensitivity, as maturing, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, in the next paragraph, I talk about why I call this substance, this actuality, radiant presence. So I'll just read the paragraph, and then we'll go over it and see what it actually is trying to say, if possible. Presence indicates the actuality, the real being of this substance. And radiant indicates its inherent nature of spontaneously generating infinite apparent experiential characteristics and implications, as well as their intrinsic apprehension as what we call experience. So, presence and radiance are sort of the two sides of a coin that I'm using as handles to approach this that has no handles. Presence, this is present, right? The less said about it, the better. It's completely obvious that your experience is present, right? What does that mean? Well, you can't say what it means, can you? Transcendental. It's not amenable to analysis. It's not amenable to sorting it out or deconstructing or trying to, find the mechanism. It just is a given that it's present. But it's completely self-evident that it's present. Presence means it's actual, right? It is. Your experience is. Your experience is present. Your experience is actual. Your experience is here, right? I mean, this is just self-evident. You can take it as an axiom, but that makes it logical, and it's completely illogical. It's just the fact. It happens to be the case that this is actual. This is here. This is real. This is present. It is present. So, present. Completely clear, completely obvious. Right? And it is radiant. What does that mean? Well, here's this present. What does it look like? What's it doing? Well, wow! Damn! Turn it down. I mean, Jesus Christ. The colors, the brightness, the shapes, the sounds, the textures, the subtle weirdness, the incredible, I mean, just everything. It's like, forget it, right? It's just like, you're just being continually overloaded with too much information forever, like always, right? I mean, this is just obvious. It's this ongoing virtual bombardment with all of these incredible qualities, all of which seem to be completely different than each other, and none of which resolve into any coherence with relationship to either themselves or each other, and yet out of this incredible, jumbled, hopelessly infinite jigsaw puzzle, we pretend to piece together a world, and piece together a life, and piece together a history, right? With arrogance. But so all of this bombardment, all of this, this completely unassimilatable overload of characteristics, where's it coming from? Well, it's just present, isn't it? It's just in the presence. The presence shows up like that. Does presence ever show up without that? I don't think so. Check it out. Even when it's nothing, even when you're completely knocked out by deep general anesthesia, it may be incredibly subtle, and almost nothing, and yet it's an infinity of subtle, an infinity of nothing. It is also still a bombardment of unresolvable, incoherent qualities, characteristics. We're expert at designating certain of the more obvious characteristics like color or form or loudness, or temperature, these kinds of things. But, if you really try to catalog every experiential characteristic whatsoever that shows up within your experience, right? I mean, where do you start? Where do you stop? I mean, you just look at a nanosecond of experience and, forget it, right? Just completely forget it. It's just, completely too much information, right? It's completely obvious. Radiantly radiating within the presence. Presence always shows up, as all of this astounding radiance of experiential characteristics. Calling them experiential characteristics, what does that mean? Well, who knows what it means? It's not, because you can't go further. You can't say what it is. You can't resolve it. You can't define it. As we already discussed, it's transcendental, which means it's self-evident, it's completely actual and completely obvious, but beyond that, it's just itself. It's just what it is, the way it is, and you can't go any farther than that. You can't take it farther. You can't make sense of it. You can't define it or describe it or put it in a book, or it's just not going to work. You can't capture the actuality. So, presence indicates the actuality, the real being, that this is here, of this substance, of this that is here. It is really here. It is present. Right? It's concretely here. And radiant indicates its inherent nature of spontaneously generating infinite apparent experiential characteristics. All this stuff, all this buzz, all of this what have you, and implications, as well as their intrinsic apprehension. So the knowing of all of this that shows up also just is here, isn't it? Right? It just radiates out. It's not like the knowing needs to be found somewhere and applied, brought up, and like let me bring up the big guns of knowing and apply it to all of this stuff that's showing. It's not like that, is it? It's in this unending overload of infinite experiential characteristics shining forth in your experience unstoppably, right? There's equally and simultaneously and essentially identically infinite shining forth of knowing, of engagement, of experiential assimilation, right? And you can't say what any of that is, what it means, right? Can you? I mean, it's transcendental, so of course you can't say what it means. But here it is. It's completely obvious. As what we call experience. So this that is present, this that is radiating as infinite experiential characteristics and their experiential engagement, experiential, call it assimilation, is what we call experience. Right? This is your experience. Right? This is it. Yeah.
Could you say experience is intelligence meets intelligence?
Absolutely. Sure. So we've talked about presence, we've talked about radiance, and this retreat is about the yoga of radiant presence. So that leaves out yoga. We haven't talked about yoga yet. So the yoga consists of first noticing, then coming to fully realize that there is in actuality nothing, and has never been or will ever be anything, other than this condition of absolutely inclusive, transcendental, intrinsic engagement of radiant presence with itself. So all this stuff that we've been talking about, this presence, the actuality of this that is here, the actuality of its astounding diversity of experiential qualities that appear with absolute dynamism, absolute instability, absolute differentiation, the spontaneous, effortless, completely intimate engagement as experience, as knowing, as participation, it is this intrinsic engagement of radiant presence with itself. It's absolutely inclusive. There's nothing else. This is it. This is the whole show. The entire universe. Everything whatsoever that is being, that is real, that is actual, is this. Your experience, i.e., the intrinsic transcendental engagement of radiant presence with itself. Right? And the yoga is coming to realize this, coming to see it as it is. Okay? Now, we're always seeing it, of course. We've never seen anything else. Right? You've never seen anything other than your experience. So what is all of this spirituality about? What is all of this confusion about? What is the human perspective about? What is, transcendental realization about? What is infinity about? What is all this about? Well, it's very paradoxical, because even though this astounding condition is all that has ever been experienced, is all that has ever existed, exactly as it is, it cannot realize itself. It can be with itself superficially. It can be with itself relatively stupidly. It can be with itself heavy-handedly. It can be with itself relatively insensitively. In which case, it perceives itself clumsily. It perceives itself inexactly. It perceives itself insensitively, imprecisely. It perceives itself by not really being with the fullness of what is present, but it was a very selective kind of an acknowledgement. And we all know this from the human perspective, right? We all know this from the human perspective. We identify with what makes sense in our lives, and all of the weird noise and background stuff and just little bizarre aspects that are obviously experientially present. We just sort of sweep them into the background. I'm getting distracted. Let me focus on what's important here. I've got this job, and I've got to get to the job, and not piss off my boss, and I've got to this, I've got to that, right? So all of these sort of very oversimplified, heavy-handed constructions of what's happening in the face of the real-time actuality of the presence of this infinite bombardment of characteristics, and we just write most of them off as irrelevant, and we ignore them, right? And this is what the human perspective is made of. This is how the human perspective, calling it the human perspective is obviously just creating a fiction, but nonetheless, this is what people who think they're people who need people. Sorry, I don't know where that came from. But people who think they're people who are stuck in the human perspective, people who are like, oh my God, I'm in this pathetic life, what am I going to do? Let me look into spirituality and see what I can do. Right? Well, how does that come about? In the face of this astounding, transcendental, really obvious, infinite presence. How does that come about? It comes about through, very selective censorship of experience. And this is what the human perspective consists of. And it is, even the human perspective, as this very censored, very heavy-handedly partialized filtering of experience through a kind of an auto-hypnotic mechanism. We hypnotize ourselves to only notice what matters. You walk into a room and you see who's in it and who's important to you, as opposed to noticing, the color of every single shade, of every nuance, of every flicker of light on the wall, right? It's like, oh God, get out of my face, it distracts me. I'm here for business, I'm here to take care of things, I'm here to impress people. I'm here to, conceal my frailties, I'm here to pretend that I have it together. All the stuff that normal human functioning and psychological participation consists of is, maintained through a kind of an auto-hypnotic denial of all of the extra information which doesn't seem to be part of the important story, the major plot line. And the consciousness is very good, it can be very good at filtering this stuff out, at distracting it. But it's at a loss. You gain participation in the human drama, but it's a great loss because you lose the transcendental infinity that you actually consist of, that this actually explicitly consists of and always has consisted of. So this yoga consists of nothing more or less than coming to notice what's actually here. And what's actually here is actually here, even if you're used to approaching it through a heavily censored mindset of a human filtering interpretive framework, right? Because all the information is actually here. Even then, the information is here. So it's simply a matter of letting yourself notice that is the case. Notice what's actually present in your experience. And in practice, this is done by, it takes very different guises in different phases of the process, different phases of your maturity at being able to engage with it. In the more beginning phases, it takes the guise of noticing anything outside your normal framework. This can look like, walking past a beautiful flower and just letting yourself, wow, feel it. Seeing an amazing sunset and just going, or being in a situation where ordinarily you're focusing on people and events and exchanges and something in some sort of a human game structure, some human plot line that you're defining as important, and just look at the light shining from a light over in the corner. It's just there, and it's not at all a part of your story. It's not part of your relevance, but it's there, and wow, it's something. And all of a sudden you're outside of the hypnosis. You're outside of the interpretive framework that constitutes, psychological normalcy, that constitutes your life, your so-called life. And it actually, you're engaging with your real life, which is the full field of your presence that you in fact actually are. And so this yoga consists of discovering that this is the case and developing sensitivity to being able to be with it ever more fully, ever more intimately, ever more appreciatively. And that's what it is. What else can we touch on?
Can we have a break for Bravo? That was unbelievable.
It still is unbelievable.
And it is.
It still is fucking unbelievable. It always will be. That's the yoga. Feel the fucking unbelievable. That's the short mantra.
How about the quote?
Oh yeah, the quote. Oh yeah, thank you. Okay. So, when the I is single, the entirety is filled with light. So what does this refer to? Ordinarily, we break up, the I represents perceiving faculty, or the knowing faculty, right? Ordinarily, we break up our perceiving faculty into all these pieces. I have my 5 senses or my 6 senses, and I have my I, and there's my personality here, and I'm somewhere way at the back of it. But all of this conglomerate complication is somehow being with parts and parcels of experience and like that. But is your experience really like that? And if you look at the fact of experience is being experienced as a whole, as an instantaneous, effortless, intrinsic engagement already, right? And that is being represented in this statement by the I is single. What is perceiving this is the one condition. And what is in that condition, what does this look like? It looks like an infinite field of light. It looks like an infinite field of radiance, radiant presence. It looks like an infinite field of experiential characteristics that exist with absolute insubstantiality, absolute dynamism, absolute infinity in every regard. And this is what the perspective that Jesus was presenting is. And this is the perspective that you are in fact already always experiencing and have always been experiencing and will always experience. And coming to notice that this is the case and how profoundly this is the case is what the yoga of radiant presence is about. Yoga of radiant presence is a formula which approaches it in 3 pieces. But this is not 3 pieces. This is not made of 3 pieces. This is exactly this. This is exactly itself. This is exactly radiant presence. This is exactly reality. This is exactly God. This is exactly the yoga of radiant presence. And all of that is just different ways of saying the same thing. In fact, every word that any human has ever and will ever utter is just another way of saying the same thing. Because there's nothing else to talk about. We could talk about politics, and what would we actually be talking about? this astounding condition, right? We could talk about ecology, what would we be talking about? We could talk about psychology, what would we be talking about? You know, we could talk about physics, what would we be talking about? And there's only one thing to talk about. This is really just an attempt to be with it as it is most directly and most comprehensively. And there's no, it's really important in practical terms to understand there's no downside here. Analysis is not a dirty word. Rationality is not a dirty word. Figuring it out and thinking about it is not a dirty word. These things are not at all a problem because they are itself its modes. Rational intelligence and logic and all that come from are ramifications and modes of this. So they embody it just as sacramentally as any other of its aspects embodies it. All functioning whatsoever, even our ignorance and our immaturity of not being with it well, it's doing it. It's its mode. That itself is a sacred function, if you will, is a sacrament of this astounding condition. We're really just taking advantage of a loophole here. It is possible to notice and to be with this more subtly, more sensitively, more directly than we are used to noticing or used to appreciating that we are. And it's not actually a better thing to do. It's just a kind of a loophole that it can be possible to do that, and there's some really wonderful side effects of doing that, such as the cessation of suffering and the attainment of enlightenment and all this kind of fancy folderol, which can result from taking advantage of this loophole. But it's not even in itself. It's not a good thing. It's just an opportunity. There's nothing wrong with being with this anyway. There's nothing wrong with normal procedures. There's nothing wrong with thinking you're a human being. And if you choose to, or if you have the ability or the inclination to avail yourself of the fact that you're actually not a human being, and take advantage of the implications of that, then that's cool because you can do it. But in so doing, you haven't actually gained anything because you never were a human being. And thinking you are a human being is not in any way a limitation because you never were a human being. It's like going lucid in a dream is not an advantage; it's just a possibility. Being lost in a dream and knocked around by all the bullshit, it's a big fun. It's entertainment, but what's the downside? And you're going lucid in a dream and saying, this is all a dream, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's kind of fun and exhilarating, but you don't actually gain anything. It's still just a dream. It hasn't actually stopped being a dream or started being something else. You're just letting yourself take advantage of an intrinsic possibility of being with it in a different way. And if you have an inclination or an ability or a motivation to do so, it's possible to do so. And if you don't have a motivation or inclination to do so, I don't know what you're doing here.
I wanted to...
This is completely inconceivable. Completely, utterly, totally inconceivable. Mind-bogglingly, weirdly, crazily inconceivable. And yet, it's actual, it's real. It's the sole thing that is actual. It's the sole thing that is real. So expecting it to make any sense is crazy. Because it makes no sense. And that's sane. So the problem with confusion is only confusing if you think it's not supposed to be. This makes absolutely no sense. It's completely confusing. So, no wonder you're confused. No wonder you've always been confused, right? The only problem is if you think that's a problem. I'm not supposed to be confused. I'm supposed to have a handle on this. I'm supposed to make sense of this, right? Has that ever happened? When you get that it's infinitely weird, infinitely non-linear and irrational, I mean, how easy, what a joy. It's like, oh, cool. I always knew it was. Then you get to not come down on yourself for being such a jerk that you can't get a handle on anything, and have to exert all this effort to pretend you've got it together. What is there to have together? What is there to have together? we're all infinitely weird and we know it, and we've all exerted all this effort to try and conceal it and convey a veneer of normalcy so, we don't get locked up and people, don't immediately eject us from a room when we walk in and all this kind of stuff. Right? But we all know it's a lot of work to pretend all this normalcy, to pretend all this conformity, when we're just like infinitely us. We're infinitely, whatever that is. You can't say. Of course you can't say, because it's inconceivable. What this is, what you are, what exists in toto, completely, is completely inconceivable. And so that's a really simple fact, and it makes so much sense. It explains so much. And just let yourself notice the actuality. Let yourself notice. This really is like that. This is absolutely inconceivable. How can this happen? How can experience happen? Look at what the Earth is. The Earth is a fucking ball floating in space. What is that? How does that happen? How do you get a ball floating in space in the middle of nothingness? Could it possibly be any weirder? Could it possibly be any weirder? Almost. The Earth floats in space. We're in this solar system. It's in a galaxy. Makes perfect sense. Yeah, right. It's just like, just notice how inconceivably bizarre and inconceivably inconceivable this is. And then all of a sudden things sort of fit into place that they don't fit into place. There's no place to fit into. It's just how it is, That's really the essence of this yoga, what I'm calling yoga. It's just noticing that experience itself is a participatory, infinite, endless weirdness. And it's not optional. It's not like you have a choice of participating. Here you are, right? You're not here because you want to be. You're not here because you're putting yourself here. You're just, whoa, You can't not be here. There's no off switch, right? And so this is here. This actuality is present, and it's weird as hell, but it's a participatory weird. You're engaged with all of it, right? Everything you experience is, it's bang, it's up close and personal. You see the trees waving in the breeze outside. It's like, wow, they may as well be whacking you in the face, right? It's in your experience. It couldn't possibly be any more intimate. When you see the sun, you're seeing it in your experience. How could it be any more intimate? How could it be any more inclusive? Sorry, a little diatribe, just a try. So what should we talk about? Anyone have anything going on? How's your retreat going so far? This isn't the retreat I signed up for. I wanted the retreat that was about something. Where's Yelp? How do you Yelp the radiant present retreat? All this guy's saying is that it's all weird. It's like, I knew that already. I didn't need to come to a damn retreat to find that out. There's one fact, there's one actuality, there's one reality, which is, you can't say what it is, but here it is, right? So, and we have all of these qualities that we claim can be found here, such as location, such as duration, such as the flow of time, such as all of these qualities, the four laws of physics, the existence of individuals, the existence of consciousness in biological systems. All of this stuff that we claim can be found, and where we claim it can be found is in this, because where else would it be? Where else would you look for anything? So location, what is location? Well, location is here. Well, this is location, and this is location, but this is there, this is here. If this is here, then that's there, and this is there. Everywhere else is there, and this is here, right? That's the claim of location. But there's a couple ways you can look at that. First of all, where is here? Okay, I mean here, just right there. Where's that? Yeah, relative to what? Relative to what? Well, it's in experience. Okay, cool. Where is experience? Here's this bubble of experience. My experience, of course, because that's the only one that exists as far as I'm concerned. You all exist solely as apparitions within my experience, just like the whole world does, and the whole universe, and the sun, and everything else. All of space, time, and history exists within my experience solely, as far as I can tell. So, where is that? Where's my experience? Well, it's here. Can I say anything more about it? What's it in? What's it sitting on? Where is it? Where's your experience? You would answer, well, it's here, right? And I would say, where? Show me. Show me your experience. Where is it? I mean, you can't wrap your head around these. You can't make sense of this. And even so here may have a relative meaning of here as opposed to here, right? But it has no absolute meaning, because here and here and here and here and there and a billion parsecs away are all where exactly in my experience, which is where. So I mean, it leaves you hanging. You can't get an answer. There's no bottom line. But more specifically than that, let's look at this here notion. So this is here. Okay, this is here, right? It's definitely here. This glass is here. Okay, is it more or less here than my hand? Well, the hand is definitely here. Okay, but how about my eyes? Well, my eye is definitely here. Is my eye more here than the hand? Where's the hand? Well, the hand's here. Well, the glass is here. Where are you? Well, you're here. But wait a minute, you're there. So here and there is just a game we play. We designate it here, and then all of a sudden we can derive all sorts of theirs. But when you look for here's and there's, all you find is this weird continuum, which is here, right? Where am I experiencing my experience? Here. Where am I experiencing the sun? Here. So where's the sun? Here. Where am I experiencing the stars in the sky at night when I see them? Here, in my experience. So my experience is here. There's no there. And there's no there other than my experience. And weirdly enough, there's no here other than my experience. So in the face of that, how can you get to the bottom of any notion of location as actually being anything? Same with duration. Let's look at time. Duration. Okay. Now is real easy. There's now. But is it easy? Try and find now. Well, it's now. This is it. This. What this? Where? How? Try and find it. There's clearly no then, right? But is there a now? Well, sure, it must be a now, because this is now, right? Okay, cool. This is now. What? Where? Find it. What is it? What is a now? How long does now last? If you watch the second hand of a clock move, how long is it in any one position? Are you all familiar with Zeno's paradox? The guy, Zeno's paradox is the old riddle. You can't ever get to a wall, because to get to a wall, you'd have to go halfway there, which takes a finite amount of time, and then you have to cover half the remaining distance, which takes a finite amount of time, and then you have to cover half of that remaining distance, which takes a finite amount of time, and then half of that, which takes a finite amount of time. And so every step, every half that you have to cover takes a finite amount of time. And if you add up, and there's infinite halves, so if you add up infinite halves and they all take a finite amount of time, you end up with infinite time. So you can't ever possibly get to the wall. And yet, watch this. Watch this. How did I do that? Because there is no time. and there is no space. Now you may think that's sophistry, but it's actually the literal truth. Zeno's paradox is true. Zeno's paradox demonstrates that if there was actually space and actually time, you couldn't ever get anywhere, because it would take infinite time to get anywhere. Well, it does take infinite time, but fortunately there's no time, so that's irrelevant.
Meaning we're not getting anywhere.
No, meaning you can get anywhere you want, but there's nowhere to get, and there's no time to get there. When you get there, it's always now, and when you get there, it's always here. And you're always here now. This sounds like games. It sounds like sophistry. It sounds like, mind games. Oh, he's fucking with us. But it's more profound than that. It's more profound than that. And I invite you to explore that for yourself. Look at time. Here's time. Okay? There's a past. The past is, countless billions of years of history weighing upon us that have built to this moment. I can feel the weight of them. I'm just crushed by what? Where? Show me a past. Show me a nanosecond of a past. Doesn't exist. It does not exist. It's a complete fiction. It's a reasonable fiction. It's reasonable. There's all these intricate circumstances here that seem to be, following upon the evolution of equally intricate circumstances which I can remember having existed, which have morphed in various strange, seemingly semi-causal ways into the circumstances which seem to be present, right? But all of that exists as an assertion. It doesn't. You can't actually find it. Where is this? Where are these previous circumstances? Well, I remember them. What does remember them mean? Well, they're pictures in my mind. Okay, cool. Pink elephants are pictures in my mind. Where are they? So, the lunch I had yesterday is a picture in my mind, and the pink elephants that are climbing out of the UFO that just landed in the center of the room are equally pictures in my mind. Are they equally real? Maybe. That's kind of interesting, isn't it? Where's the future? Well, this is building, this enormous progress of billions of years of evolution from the Big Bang into this incredibly evolved biological system on planet Earth, which is just a minuscule of where its evolution is going as these astounding forms continue to develop in this, exciting adventure of life within the galaxy, blah, blah, blah. Boldly going where no man has gone before, etc. So, all of that is spin doctoring. What can you find? What's real? What's actual? You don't know. Right? And you can't find it here, or you can't find anything other than here. And you can't find a now, or you can't find anything other than now. And so the whole thing just completely spins into the irrationality that it actually consists of. Which brings us back to my opening point for this talk. This makes absolutely no fucking sense. This is completely irrational. It's completely indescribable. It's entirely inconceivable. Not just as a side effect. It is intrinsically that. A good way to interface with this, a very simple way that is much less of a doing is just beauty, or lusciousness, or amazingness, or even ugliness. If you see something that's very repulsive, just the immediacy of that, the vibrancy, the poignancy, the vitality of that flavor, or beauty. You see a sunset, or a flower, anything whatsoever. It's beautiful. What is that? Why is how is that so palpable? How is that so present? And I think the simplest way to interface with this, so to speak, is just through texture. And texture conveys itself through quality. Experience is not black and white. It is not boring. It has vibrancy. It has impact. It has startlement. It has, and this comes as qualities of flavor. I mean, literally like flavor, like you take a bite of food and it explodes in your mouth as a quality. It may not be a particularly good quality, but it's there, it's a present, it's an actuality. And this, just that, is a doorway to amazingness. What is this? What is this presence? What is this? How can these qualities be present? And right there is mystery. Right there is openness. And so, I mean, yesterday I said, in a profound sense, an easy way to approach this is just as hedonism. Just enjoying the lusciousness of experience. You see something beautiful or something attractive or something with any kind of wow factor, and wow, just drinking that in, it's transcendental. I mean, how can that happen? It doesn't make any sense. It's entirely irrational. There's no explanation for experiential quality. There's no explanation for, that something has this amazing qualities of vitality, of meaningfulness, of anything, any sort of a quality at all. So just looking around in your experience and finding something with just a little, and even just the way a light sparkles or anything, all of a sudden there's something there that is, what is this? What is this? It's real. It's actual, and it's palpable. And what is that? What is that made of? Not that, of course, that there's answers to these questions, but it's a way of being with the vitality of it, which is a transcendental quality. Vitality is transcendental. Vitality makes no sense. Life force makes no sense, right? Energy makes no sense. It's not rational. It doesn't. You can't explain it. You can't, figure it out. It's astounding, right? And just being with that as that is transformative. Maybe not as a huge thing, maybe just as a little, just an incremental thing, but that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be some huge be-all and end-all. The appreciating the astoundingness of experience is a cumulative transformation. It's a cumulative transformative engagement. just even tiny little snippets. I try to emphasize in this presentation the essential unity of this actuality that is here. Not because that is its exclusive mode, of course, but because our normal tendency, the way we typically approach it as human beings, is in terms of analysis and separating it, and separating conditions out, and this condition and that condition, and different people and different circumstances and different actions. And so we're used to splitting the world and splitting our experience into all these categories and subcategories and entities and sub-entities, which is fine. This is a very viable way of approaching this, and obviously it's workable to do so. But it can be seductive to suppose, as a kind of perhaps a consensus reality modern worldview does, that's how things are. Things are fundamental chunks of separate entities that are somehow juxtaposed and clashed against each other with various degrees of disharmony. And certainly there is that aspect of things, and that's absolutely viable and useful as a mode. But typically, people are unaware of the other side of the coin, the absolute unity of being, the unity of presence, the unity of the experiential field that is absolutely inclusive, although subtle and typically not our normal mode of engagement, because it doesn't seem very useful. And what do you do with that? Okay, there's just one thing, but how's that going to get me an income? How's that going to do? How's that going to win friends and influence people? How's this going to whatever sort of game structures we have in interacting with human society and our, the status in our lives and so on and so forth. But in actuality, it is profoundly empowering to experience the unity of one's being, because you are the totality of your experiential field. We've explored aspects of this in various ways over the course of the last few days. And doing so is profoundly empowering, profoundly healing in the sense of experiencing wholeness, experiencing integrity. And being able to be more inclusive of aspects that typically we are exclusive of. Being able to be inclusive, there are typically aspects of our functioning, aspects of qualities whatsoever that we identify with, and we think we own them or have them, or they're parts of our lives, and other things that we sort of feel distant from, or they're somehow out there and they're not us. But in actuality, all energy qualities are included in the field, and so they're all equally in play, so to speak. They're all equally available and an aspect of what you are. Trying to put this rationally is of course absurd, impossible to do accurately, because it's not. It's an axiom. It's a given. It's the actual fact, but it is virtually impossible to reason your way to that. You can do it in sorts of by appealing to, unified field theories of, a unified field of physics that includes consciousness and so on and so forth, and that's actually fairly accurate. But still, in all, approaching it as an abstraction is missing the point, because it's not an abstraction. It's absolutely concrete. It is the actual concrete objective condition out of which all of the divisions are abstracted. Most in normal human worldview, we're used to thinking all of the entities are objectively true, and these unifications are an abstraction, but it's actually the other way around. The experiential field is what's objectively true, and all of the entities and conditions, the sub-conditions that seem to exist within it, are abstractions, abstracted out of the fact of the presence of experiential field. When you were born, you were born into a unified experiential field. It just appears, and then you learn to separate. Oh, this is a human body. This is an object. This is this. This is that. But this is a differentiation out of a unified field. Or in a dream, the only thing present in a dream is the field of dreaming, and it may seem to present with all these flavors and qualities, and these qualities, through a process of abstraction, get turned into a this and a that, which seem to be interacting. But all that's there in actuality, substantially, is the field of the dream. And of course, we experience this mechanically, or let's just say substantially. When you wake up, everything disappears at once. You close your eyes, everything disappears at once. It's not like this disappears and that disappears and this disappears and that disappears. It's not piecemeal. The field comes and goes as a whole. The field of vision is a whole. I can, the consciousness and intelligence can effortlessly, draw circles around subsets within the field, and these are human beings, and these are objects, and these are individual threads in the rug, and these are lights, and sort of separate out all of these subfields of the field, subsets of the set of the field of vision. But this is a process of abstraction. So these separate entities are abstracted out of the concrete actuality of the unified field which is present. But typically, in normal human frame of reference, the opposite is sort of held to be true. The field of vision is somehow, there's a field of vision, but I'm seeing this, that, and the other, and they're really here. As opposed to the field of vision is really here, and the consciousness hypothesizes all of these sub-entities and so on and so forth. The actuality that is here is the field of your experience. All the information that's appearing in it is like a virtual information display. I expect some of you are familiar with the old Star Trek TV series where they had a holodeck that is basically creates a virtual reality projection of holograms that seems to be actual when there's nothing particularly there. That's a very good analogy for what this is. There seems to be all of this information, but all that there really is the energy that it's constituted of. Like, for example, in the holodeck, however the holograms were projected, one can imagine light of some kind. All that was really there was light, but it looks like all of these various, objects and environments and so on and so forth. So likewise, when you see your field of vision, all you're seeing is light. All you can see is light. You've never seen anything other than light in your entire life, never have and never will. There's nothing to see but light. The eyes see light, they perceive photons. You don't see people, you don't see things, you don't see environments, you see light. Now the light seems to be very intensely patterned, and the intelligence looks at these patternings and abstracts that maybe these patternings are readouts of actually existing conditions out there in some world that may exist out there and so on and so forth. But the immediate fact, the concrete fact, is just the presence of the energy that the experiential field is presenting. In the case of field of vision, what we call light. In the case of field of hearing, what we call sound. In the case of field of mentality, what we call thought. And it's basically, I argue, it's basically just a continuous spectrum of some kind of mysterious energy that is what light actually consists of, thought actually consists of, sound actually consists of, and basically all phenomena that are perceived are essentially patternings within this energy that is the medium of this display. So it's extremely simple. There's the display of the experiential field. And all the content and all of the seeming events and all the extrapolation and abstraction of what is being experienced and what it consists of and so on and so forth is abstracted out of interpretations of the patterns that this energy seems to present us. So it's extremely simple. It's extremely simple. And this doesn't really change anything because this has always been the case. I mean, even if you ask a neurologist or a perceptive, a scientist who studies the mechanism of perception, they'll say, yeah, you don't experience the world. You experience electrochemical activity in your brain, which appears as a pattern which, theoretically corresponds to some actual events out there. But there's no way to know that because you never actually experience those. All you experience is the patterning. And then it's a hypothesis that it actually corresponds to something in some sense. But then we dream, and when we wake up, we experience essentially a dream can be just as concrete and objective and detailed as waking experience. And yet you wake up and there was nothing there. It didn't even happen. But when we're awake, no, but this is the real world. This is really here. This is really outside. And it may or may not be. The point isn't that the real world isn't here. The point is you can't know. Because the reality is the only contact you have is with the energy of the display, the energy that presents as the information of that constitutes the experiential field. And, so this is, logically this is actually not earth-shaking. It's really actually common sense. But the implications of what this feels like, the feeling tone of realizing that, there's this mysterious bubble present of information readout, that seems to be being perceived in mysterious ways. And every aspect of how that happens and what the mechanism is and what the elements that constitute it are all just theoretical. You can't know. You can't know what consciousness is, if anything. You can't know what the energy that constitutes the information is, if anything. And that's all that is actually undeniably self-verifyingly present. And the implications of when you see this, the feeling tone of what the implications are, what you are. Oh, I am a bizarre transcendental bubble of information presentation. Period. You know, and the bodies and the entities and the circumstances and history and all of the details are, you know, abstract interpretations of patterns that seem to be appearing as a readout within this information display that is the field of perception, the field of experience. You know, that the field of experience exists, whatever that means, is the sole fact. And anything else is guesswork. Anything else is hypothesis. And that, again, that doesn't necessarily negate any particular hypothesis, but it's unverifiable. The only thing that is absolutely bankable, that is absolutely certain, is the presence of the experiential field. And there's only one, which is very interesting. Mine. You may say the same thing if you actually exist, but I can't know that because you're just an apparition in my experiential field. Of course, I'm an apparition as a body and as a personality. I am also an apparition in my experiential field. So Peter Brown, the human being, is a pure hypothesis. But the presence of this experiential field, this right here, is absolutely certain. And I am that. I am this. So, anyway, that's a rather simple way of putting the essential principle that all of this consists of. And then all of the ramifications and ins and outs and nuances and implications are interesting, but they all follow from this fundamental fact. And interesting, but not surprisingly, if you look at all the great spiritual traditions, their core teachings amount to the same thing. You know, in Advaita, everything is the Atma, everything is the self. You know, it's just another way of putting the same fact. There is this one presence of actuality that everything consists of. What's really interesting about words is, as soon as you say something, it seems to establish a relevance. For example, if you're in a room where people are sitting silently and no one's saying anything, what could someone say if they suddenly spoke up, right? Anything, right? They could talk about, you know, the behavior of some, you know, early grain-growing civilization in the Russian steppes 4,000 years ago, or they could talk about politics, or they could talk about, you know, spirituality, or you could talk about what happened yesterday at the mall. And as soon as you talk about something, it seems to establish that, you know, it's like collapsing a field of infinite possibility when it could be anything. Like in silence, everything is present as a potentiality. But all of a sudden you say something and bang, it's a specific thing. So you go to a group of people and they're chatting about this and that and what so-and-so did yesterday, and gosh, you know, did you hear about such and such, it just happened, and all this stuff that people talk about. And everything that they're not saying is equally true. Everything they're not saying is equally present, but it's not being made explicit because they're not putting it into words. And this is one of the, you know, the really confusing sort of brainwashing fallacies about language. Is just because something is said, it all of a sudden seems to be relevant. It's being pulled out of the field of what could be said, and then all of a sudden it's on the table. But actually everything else is on the table too, equally. It just isn't being talked about. And, you know, this is part of what seems to energize and lock our focus into rational mind and rational orientation. Because the irrational mind is quite comfortable, and I'm using these terms pseudo-scientifically, the irrational mind is quite comfortable with just sort of everything all at once. And when you're not talking or you're not thinking or you're falling asleep or something, that's kind of what it is, right? And it's just, hey, that's nice. It's kind of nice. I mean, it's just luscious and rich, and it's not locked into this or that, so there's no specific problems because there's no specifics. It's a fullness of generality, a fullness of everything. And then as soon as something gets talked about, bang, it's something. It's not an anything, it's a something. And the something has implications and implies other somethings, and all of a sudden, it's like throwing a seed of a crystal into a water. All of a sudden the crystal grows, and all the water just collapses down to a specific thing. And it's interesting to notice this phenomenon because a lot of times people are uncomfortable if no one's talking. I mean, if you're sitting with people and it's quiet, it's like there's a nervousness. It's like, I mean, obviously in this crowd, you all are more sophisticated than that, but it's very common that need to have a topic of conversation. And in actual fact, what that is a focusing on creating a false partiality in an actual plenum of infinite multiplicity. All the things that could be talked about are equally true and relevant to whatever you happen to talk about. But because they're not being said, it's easy to not notice that or forget that fact. So, I mean, it's just kind of a little thing that occurred to me it'd be fun to talk about. Just as a way of, and thought is, of course, the same thing, because thought is kind of talking to yourself in a way, right? Just because you happen to be thinking of something, everything you're not thinking about explicitly is equally present, equally relevant, and equally true. Again, all the same, perspective applies to that. And so, again, this is kind of an interesting aspect of the way the mind partializes interpretation, partializes definition of reality according to what is being making explicit verbally or semantically, versus just the fullness that exists when it hasn't collapsed down to a specific. Every thought you could think is equally relevant to the thought you happen to be thinking. Right? And yet, the one you think is the one that seems to be important. That's what sort of, becomes the seed of some degree of obsession, of seeming relevance. Whereas what you're not thinking has a seeming less relevance, which is completely, entirely artificial and just not true. Everything, how do you know? Everything is equally relevant. The distribution of dust around a particular square inch on the backside of the moon is just as important as what's happening in the Oval Office right this second. In fact, that is true. But who gives a shit about the dust on the far side of the moon in that particular square inch, right? No one ever in history, except me now, is going to talk about it. No other human is ever going to talk about that particular dust in that particular square inch. It may as well be non-existent. In fact, it is non-existent because I'm hypothesizing it. But the point is this. The point is that everything that's not, even something not being made consciously explicit, is real, is relevant, and in the way that it is. In the meditation this morning, when you're feeling experience, you're just in a sea of flavors and vibes and non-specificity and all this stuff. And every now and then something sort of floats up as specific. A thought will occur, or you'll notice something, or whatever. It sort of zooms into a focus that seems to be something, right? And then it sort of may dissipate, or something else will come in, or for a second they'll sort of space out, and there'll just be this sort of weird flowing whatever, right? And so there's endless seemings of all this zooming in and out, all this, different degrees of focus, different degrees of coherence, different degrees of seeming to be anything in particular. And it's all equally real. It's all the way this works. This can collapse down to seeming focuses, foci. This can space out into just amorphous, weird, sort of whatever, right? And those are all it's genuine modes, and those are all real. Those are all valuable. They're all, since in normal human identification, we're waking state Nazis. The waking state is real. The person I am in the waking state is real. The sleep is I'm just not here, and so it's irrelevant because the waking person is non-existent. And dreams, I'm just deluded because I'm not really me. I'm just in some other thing, and I'm just wandering around. But then I finally wake up and get to what's real, right? It's completely arbitrary. What if deep sleep is what's real, and dreams in the waking state are complete delusion? I mean, from the point of view of the mindset that the waking state is completely real, exactly the same argument could be made for the deep sleep state from that point of view, if there was sufficient coherence there to make that assertion, right? So the point is that the inherent condition is what matters, is what is real. And the inherent condition, what this is, what I call the radiance, is what shows up as all conditions. It shows up as focus. It shows up as amorphousness. It shows up as the incredible coherence and structure and analysis of the waking mind and so on, and waking experience with all this incredible visual detail. It shows up as the strange wash, and whatever of deep sleep. It shows up as the partial coherence and incoherence and weirdness of dreams. It does all that effortlessly. It's all equally real. It's all symptoms of what this is, which is not what it looks like. What it is what is appearing as what it looks like. What it is generating the appearance of what it looks like. But what it is what it is, and it is that looks like this. It is that looks like deep sleep. It is that looks like dreams. It is that looks like whatever being after you're dead looks like. What this is what its nature is to appear and present to itself, because what's seeing this is, of course, the same thing as what's being seen. What's here is what is generating all of this appearance and what is perceiving all this appearance, but it itself is not actually contained by the appearance. Right? The dream doesn't contain the dreaming consciousness. When the dream ends, the dreaming consciousness doesn't stop. The dreaming consciousness is not dependent upon the dream, it's the other way around. Right? The dream is a symptom of the dreaming consciousness, not the other way around. And the same with the waking state. The waking state is a symptom of something else. Right? Deep sleep state is a symptom of something else. After death state is a symptom of something else. And that something else is what this really is, what you really are. And it is not, it is included in its presentation, right? It's included in its apparition. The waking state is reality because it's made of reality and is an artifact of reality. So reality is right here, and this is real, but it's not limited to or dependent upon having to look like this. It's exactly the same reality looks like deep sleep, and it's exactly the same reality is perceiving deep sleep in exactly the same way, even though it looks like a very different way from the waking perspective, which in the waking perspective is a detail Nazi. It wants to know, no, this is this and that's that, and I can tell the difference. And deep sleep, there's no difference. It's just woo. I mean, who knows what it is? But you can't say from the waking state because it's such an alien condition. But the deep sleep state is just as real, is just as genuine a presentation of reality, and the mode of its apperception by consciousness in deep sleep, which is so strange and amorphous and non-individuated and non-egocentric and so on and so forth, is just as genuine a mode. So being biased towards a particular sort of a structural apparition or a particular, structural, formal presentation as being more or less real, more or less genuine, more or less indicative of what's really going on here, is a mistake. It can be misleading. So reality is completely unlike the waking state, just like it's completely unlike the deep sleep state, just like it's completely unlike the dream state. What is it like? Radiant presence. Yes. And this is directly knowable because, in fact, you are always knowing it. The radiant presence is here as this. And exactly the same radiant presence is here as deep sleep. Exactly the same radiant presence is here as dreaming. Exactly the same radiant presence is here as after death. it will look radically different. Every one of these conditions look radically different, and look different in themselves in the moment, right? Because it's always an absolutely unique, surprising presentation. But so radiant presence is here, but it's not actually limited to the way it seems to be presenting. It presents as all infinite sort of semi-coherent, seeming vignettes of coherence. But it itself is of a whole different order, a whole different order of coherence. It is a shining forth, non-spatially and non-temporally, and yet actually, and all of this space and time and detail is one of its modes of appearing to itself. Because what's perceiving it is also the radiant presence. What is seeing your experience is radiant presence. What is being seen is radiant presence. Not as an abstraction or a theory or philosophy, but in fact. And this is directly knowable. It's knowable strangely, because what it is so weird and transcendental. It's not like you say, yeah, it's here. It's shaped kind of like this, and it's sitting right over there. It's not like that, is it? And yet, you know it by being it. You know it because you are it. You know it because its texture permeates all of reality. Its texture is being. Deep sleep is. It shares actuality. It shares being. It shares presence. It shares qualitativeness. The qualitativeness may be very amorphous and slightly, God knows what it is, right? You can't even remember in the waking state what it looks like. But it looks the way it looks, which is seemingly very different than the way the waking state looks. But nonetheless, it is some degree of qualitativeness, even if it's sort of amorphous flickers, vague flickers or whatever, right? It's still characteristics. So there's always presence, beingness, isness. And beingness is palpable. It's real. It's not an abstraction, right? When I say, when we're doing the meditation, I say, you are here, feel what that feels like. You can feel it. You feel your here-ness. It's not, you don't even sit and think about, well, gosh, am I here or not? Is this really here? It's so totally, blatantly, nakedly, self-verifyingly obvious that presence is, isness is, that if someone said to you, maybe this isn't, maybe this doesn't exist, it's laughable, it's absurd, because it's completely, palpably, immediately a given, a known, a certainty that presence is, being is, isness is. Talking about it is absurd. It's so non-verbal, but it's completely actual. And it's equally actual that isness looks like something, right? It appears. Even whether the appearance is incredibly, inconceivably vague, like say what, I suppose many of you have had, major surgery, whether you get total anesthesia and you're just gone, you're just out of there. That appearance, what that looks like when you're in it, is very, very tenuous. It's very subtle. It's almost nothing. It's almost non-existent, but not quite. It still is, and it still has characteristics, just very, very subtle ones. Maybe after death it's going to be even more tenuous, or maybe not, who knows? You'll find out before very long. We all know. But it will be present, and it will have characteristics, because presence and characteristics exist beyond space and time. They exist beyond life and death, because all of these conditions are artifacts of this actuality, this beingness, of reality itself. Reality is a great word, and it sounds like an abstraction, just reality, let's discuss reality. But reality is nothing other than radiant presence, right? If I say reality here, right? Immediately it's like, yeah, no-brainer, reality here. Exactly what it is you can't describe and you can't say how it works, but that it is a given, right? It's completely obvious. What is completely obvious about it is, and it is something. You can't say what, but it's not nothing, right? It presents in some degree, right? And that's the constant, being and apparition. And one of my formulas that I say over and over is, it can look like anything, but it never departs from itself. It can look like absolutely anything. It can look like waking state. It can look like sleep state. It can look like a dream. It can look like after death. It can look like deep anesthesia. It can look like anything it can look like, but it's always exactly this. It's the same, it's this condition that is here that happens to look like the way it looks at the moment. And it happens to look the way it looks at the moment when you're asleep. And it happens to look the way it looks at the moment when you're dreaming. But it's the same condition that just happens to look that way. And its nature is such that it has all of these modes, apparent modes of apparition, but it is itself. And the apparition just comes with, it's inherent in its nature that it should do that. That was a good spiel.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what's on my mind. What's on your mind?
Same thing.
What's
You use
that?
the word fractal sometimes.
Sure, fractal is a great word.
That's kind of what you were talking about, right?
In many ways, fractal is very relevant to this. Fractal nicely embodies the notion that you can have all kinds of implicit structure that's really spread out and very differentiated, that is actually sort of generated from and consists of a really essential seed that is not particularly spread out. I mean, the formula that generates a fractal is just a very simple inequality or something. I mean, the whole Mandelbrot set looks like, 2 letters and a non-equal sign, right? And yet, if you do that and see what it looks like by putting it into a computer, bang, you get an infinity of detail that's completely different from itself in every point, from every other point. And yet all of that detail is just what this one very simple equation happens to look like if you do the math, if you do a readout of it. So, fractals really nicely illustrate that notion. I mean, likewise, there's all this detail, right? Just take the visual field at the moment, right? Everyone here can see pretty well. So, your visual field is full of, how much detail is in your visual field? I mean, about like infinity, right? About like a whole hell of a lot, right? And yet, what if all of that is a readout of just like kind of one energy event? Who knows, right? I mean, look at a dream. In a dream, there's all of this incredible readout. Dreams can be very detailed. I mean, frequently in the waking state, I think that when people remember a dream, they seem vague and ghostly. But that's because you're looking at the memory of it, not the experience itself. When you're in a dream, if those of you that have gone lucid in a dream, dreams can be just as detailed as this. Dreams can be really, really, a lot of detail, very coherent, very seemingly solid. And yet, where's that coming from? Right? I mean, all this detail, you can have a full visual field in a dream, when there's nothing there. And here, where's this coming from? You close your eyes, it all vanishes. You go to sleep, it all vanishes. If you go to sleep and you die in your sleep, it's gone forever at the moment you close your eyes. So where is it? Where is it? It's in your field of vision. Is it out here, whatever that means? When you're dreaming, is it out here? There's no out and there's no here in a dream. When you wake up, you see that there was no out and there was no here. It may have looked as though there was, right? But it's not like that. Sorry, I'm obviously talkative today.
Good job.
Yeah, so try talking.
Radiant presence is like infinite possibility, but it has to appear as something in
Right.
any instant.
And its nature is to do so. That's the radiant part. The present part is that it is, it's real, it actually is, it is here. And that's always a true statement. It is here is always true. In deep sleep, it is here is true. In a dream, it is here is true. Even if you're not there to make the statement, it's still a true statement, right? But it always looks like something, and that's the radiant part of it.
But it's always infinite possibility.
It's intrinsically, because it's not limited by what it happens to look like. It generates what it happens to look like. It looks like what it happens to look like, but it's not limited by that, right? You could dream anything, right? theoretically, let's say. And in fact, over the course of a lifetime, you will dream an inconceivable volume of surprising, spontaneous things that never repeat. And yet, all of that incredible variety comes from this one condition of being, of your existence. So, but your existence is not limited by what it happens to appear as. What it happens to appear as is just a symptom of the dreaming. It's I mean, a good analogy is like a light bulb in a movie projector. All the movies that are ever going to be shown in a movie theater come from the light of that light bulb. But the light doesn't care what movie's being shown. And when the movie's not being shown, the light is totally fine. The film can run out and the light is still sitting there shining. So the light bulb is not dependent upon the movie, but the movie is dependent upon the light bulb. Likewise, any particular readout or experiential condition like the waking state or whatever, a dream, whatever, is completely dependent upon radiant presence, but radiant presence is not dependent upon that readout. Clearly, because any particular configuration of readout vanishes instantly. I snap my fingers, that snap is now gone forever, but the radiance hasn't gone anywhere. The radiance looked like that snap when I was doing it, now it doesn't. But the radiance hasn't been damaged, it hasn't lost anything by the loss of that snap, and it didn't gain anything by the appearance of that snap. This can be tricky because it can feel like the radiant presence is an abstraction, and it can feel like the readout of experience, so-called, is a solidity. But in actual fact, they are the same ilk. All the actuality and detail and undeniable, reality of your experience right here, right now, is the exact reality and being and actuality of the radiant presence. This is the radiant presence, but it happens to look like this right now. It happens to look exactly like this, exactly right now. And now it looks different, of course. And now it looks different. And now it looks different forever. And if you fell asleep while I was talking, then it would still be looking different, right? But it's not limited to or contained by how it happens to look. But any experience borrows its seeming reality, borrows its seeming presence from the radiant presence. Because the radiant presence is what's here, and the appearance is here only because the radiant presence is here. And all qualities are like that. Like, this is, hard. I touch this and I feel hardness. I feel solidity. I touch this and I feel, sort of relative insubstantiality, but some resistance, right? Not much. That's very different than that. This hardness is not in the glass. The hardness is in the radiance. The radiance can present as hard. The radiance can present as fluid and soft. The radiance can present as light. The radiance can present as dark. And you can tell this by thinking about a dream. In a dream, you can experience something hard. You can stub your toe on a rock in a dream, or you can go swimming in water in a dream, right? Or you can feel air in a dream. And yet, when you wake up, you look back and there was nothing hard there. There was nothing wet there, right? So where did these qualities come from? Radiant presence. Radiant presence is that which presents as all experiential qualities. All experiential characteristics are symptoms of the nature of radiant presence to shine forth, to show forth as something, as what we can call experiential characteristics. But it itself is not limited to that. When it's presenting as hardness, it is not hard, because it also can present as softness. And it's not like it lost the hardness and now it's soft. It never gained hardness, and it gained softness, and there was no contradiction between them. It can present as softness, it can present as hardness, it can present as light, it can present as the tingles of touch, it can present as thought, it can present as the logical coherence of argument. It can. All these are symptoms of the ways it can show up, of its modes, but it itself is not limited by how it happens to appear.
So when you talk about that transcendentality,
yes,
you're talking about that potential.
Yes, the way in which it is not limited by what it seems to be. Yeah, it's more. It's always more than what it looks like. Right, potential. Yeah, thinking of its potentiality, but it's the actuality of potentiality, not the theoretical potentiality of potentiality.
So you can actually kind of see that
Yeah.
potentiality.
Yeah, you can know it, and if you look sensitively at your experience, you can feel that potentiality, or feel the implication of it, like for example, when you're just sort of spacing out and just not on with anything in particular, there's a lot of sort of richness there that doesn't really collapse down to anything. I mean, there's sort of implications of collapsing down, there's sort of wisps of notions and flavors and coming in and out, but they never really, maybe they don't really concretize too specifically, and so on and so forth. But, again, trying to talk about this is, in a sense, completely absurd because it cannot be talked about, which, hence the transcendentality. It transcends description, it transcends analysis, it transcends deconstruction, it transcends, figuring anything out about it. But it is knowable because, even though it's transcendental, the faculty by which you know your experience is also transcendental. So it is inconceivably weird, but so are you, in actuality. And so your power of knowing, your ability to know, is equally magical, transcendental. So it's capable of assimilating what it's engaging with, even though it's inconceivable weird. I mean, let's look right now. What's knowing your experience? I mean, you can't answer that question, can you? It's self-evident that your experience is being known, but you can't find a knower. You certainly can't find the mechanism of knowing, right? It's just weird. It's powerful. I mean, Jesus, look at the detail. Just your visual field. Look how much detail is instantly known in every instant with no lag time. I mean, that is some serious chops. That is really just showing off how powerful this knowing potency is, right? So you couldn't do that if you had to erect a structure. If you had to effortfully know your experience, it would take you lifetimes just to know an instant. Because it's so. How could you? Well, let me see. What color is that point and then this point?
How do you find an instant anyway?
Yeah, I mean the whole thing is absurd. So the knowing is really explicitly amazing and transcendental, essentially. Even though we're used to thinking, it's just me and I'm just looking here, I'm just seeing. We have a diminutive notion of what it is because we have a diminutive self-image of ourselves as a little, semi-evolved monkey derivative on in a semi-evolved culture on a small planet somewhere. Whereas in actuality, what you are, what's knowing your experience, is inconceivable potency and transcendentality. And likewise, what's being known is equally inconceivable. There's all of this amazing phenomenon, structure, and all that shows up as all of this presentation, universes and such. So it can know this because it is it. So it partakes of the same qualities, it partakes of the same nature, abilities, you might say, functionalities, as what it's trying to assimilate. So it can meet it where it is because it is where it is. It actually already is it. What is seeing your experience and what is being seen, I go like this, like it's two things, but it's a total misnomer. It's actually like this. It's just, there's no two things. Of course, that's weird, but again, it's transcendental, so no wonder it seems weird when you try and wrap your head around it.